What if the most dangerous person in the room was not the narcissist, but the empath who knows their own darkness? Narcissists are predictable. They crave admiration, they manipulate openly, they wear their hunger for power on their sleeves. But the dark empath? They are an enigma. They combine the sensitivity to feel what others feel with a direct, often unconscious connection to the shadow, the reservoir of repressed instincts, fears, and desires that Carl Jung warned about. This fusion creates something rare, a psychological intelligence that can pierce beneath surfaces, read unspoken wounds, and sense what most people desperately try to hide. Empathy, in its pure form, is the ability to resonate with another's emotions. It is the bridge of compassion. But when that resonance is fused with the shadow, it turns into something sharper. The dark empath doesn't just feel. They interpret, they anticipate. They can sense the hesitation in a voice, the flicker in an eye, the momentary tightening of a jaw, and they understand, often with uncanny accuracy, what that means. While others stumble in confusion, the dark empath sees the underlying script. Jung believed that the unconscious, when not denied, gives us access to immense energy and insight. That is why this type of empath cannot be ignored. They walk with one foot in the world of feeling and the other in the abyss of the unconscious. To those who meet them, the dark empath feels unsettling. They can validate your deepest struggle, but they can also expose your most fragile insecurity. Their presence has a dual edge, both soothing and intimidating. They hold the potential to heal with profound compassion, yet they also hold the ability to wound with precision. Imagine a scalpel. In the hands of a surgeon, it saves lives. In the hands of someone careless, it destroys. The intelligence of the dark empath is just such a scalpel. But here lies the fascination. Most people expect danger from the narcissist, the sociopath, the obvious manipulator. Few suspect it could come from the empath, the one who is supposed to feel deeply, to care, to protect. That paradox is exactly why Jung's lens is necessary. He knew the psyche is not divided into good and evil, but a vast interplay between light and shadow. The empath who denies their shadow becomes naive, forever wounded. The empath who embraces their shadow without consciousness becomes manipulative, even predatory. But the dark empath who brings awareness to both sides carries a kind of dangerous wisdom, one that can terrify or transform. And that is the promise of this journey. In the next 24 minutes, we will step inside the mystery of the dark empath. We will see what makes them unique, why their intelligence is so piercing, how Jung explained the shadow as its source, and how this dangerous gift can either corrupt or redeem. But first, we must ask, what truly sets the dark empath apart from every other archetype in the human psyche?
Most people think empathy is about feeling with others. If you're sad, I feel your sadness. If you're joyful, I share in that joy. That is ordinary empathy, a resonance, like two strings vibrating in harmony. But the dark empath operates differently. They don't just mirror emotions, they interpret them. They sense the subtext, the unsaid, the hidden motives. Where a normal empath might cry with you, the dark empath knows why you are crying, even if you don't. Imagine an emotional radar sweeping across every interaction. A typical empath's radar picks up signals of distress, joy, or tension. But the dark empath's radar is more sophisticated. It not only detects the signals, but decodes them. It tells them where the wound lies, what memory might be triggered, what weakness could be pressed. This is what makes their intelligence both fascinating and frightening. The same capacity that allows them to comfort also equips them to manipulate with surgical precision. Carl Jung would call this the fusion of anima and animus with the shadow, the inner feminine and masculine energies entwined with the repressed darkness of the psyche. It means the dark empath doesn't just feel what others feel. They instinctively know how to navigate those feelings, how to enter them, and, if they wish, how to bend them. A narcissist needs blunt control. A psychopath needs fear. The dark empath needs neither. Their power lies in subtlety, in invisibility. They can make you feel understood while quietly directing your decisions. They can use compassion as a mask for influence, and you won't notice until it's too late. This uniqueness is both a blessing and a curse, because if a dark empath chooses the path of healing, they can be extraordinary therapists, artists, guides, people who see into the soul and speak truths others are too afraid to name. But if they choose the path of shadow, they can become psychological tricksters, weaving webs of influence and extracting power from the very people who trust them most. Jung compared this to the archetype of the magician, a figure who can channel hidden forces. The magician can liberate the village or curse it. The difference is not in the power, but in the intention. And here is the cliffhanger. Why does this radar of the dark empath point so directly toward the hidden, the vulnerable, the raw? Where does this dangerous ability come from? To answer that, we must follow Jung into the depths of the shadow itself, the dark mirror of the psyche, where all repressed truths live, because it is there, in the very material most of us deny, that the dark empath draws their power.
Carl Jung taught that everything we repress does not disappear. It sinks. It slides into the unconscious, into what he called the shadow. Our anger, our envy, our lust, our humiliation, our fear, all the impulses we deny in order to remain acceptable to society, they gather there, in the dark cellar of the psyche. For most people, the shadow remains hidden. It leaks out in slips of the tongue, in sudden outbursts, in unconscious choices. But the dark empath? They have a unique relationship with this forbidden territory. Whether by trauma, by heightened sensitivity, or by sheer refusal to look away, they tap into this shadow material. And in doing so, they gain knowledge that others cannot bear to face. Think about it. When you have lived through betrayal, you can sense betrayal in others. When you've known despair, you recognize its smell in a room. When you've wrestled with rage, you understand the twitch in someone else's smile. The dark empath doesn't just sympathize, they know, because they have felt these things within themselves. Their own shadow becomes a map, a mirror, a reference point. And this grants them a form of intelligence that feels instinctive, almost psychic. They can walk into a situation and immediately perceive the hidden tensions, the suppressed desires, the lies trembling beneath the surface. It is not magic, it is shadow knowledge. Jung insisted that the shadow, though frightening, is not evil in itself. It is raw energy, unshaped and untamed. It contains our creativity as much as our destructiveness, our passion as much as our cruelty. For the dark empath, this means their sensitivity is not limited to surface emotions like sadness or joy, but extends into deeper registers: shame, rage, secret longing, existential despair. They resonate with the layers that polite society pretend do not exist, and because they do, they can access insights others cannot. This is why people often feel both seen and exposed in the presence of a dark empath. Imagine someone who looks at you and not only sees your smile, but also feels the grief you're trying to hide behind it. Imagine someone who hears your words and senses the hesitation between them. It can feel like X-ray vision, a penetrating gaze into the parts of yourself you would rather keep locked away. For some, this is healing. For others, it is terrifying. But in both cases, it is unforgettable. Here lies the validation. If you have always felt burdened by your own darkness, if you have carried shame for your intensity, your ability to sense too much, your strange fascination with pain, Jung would say this is not sickness, this is lucidity. You are not broken for noticing the shadows in yourself and others. You are awake to what most people repress. And in that awareness lies intelligence, one that can guide you if you are willing to bear its weight. But this raises a troubling question. If the shadow gives the dark empath such powerful insight, what prevents them from using it in destructive ways? If you can see into another's weakness, the temptation to exploit it becomes almost irresistible. This is where Jung's greatest warning appears. The shadow, if not integrated with consciousness, does not serve you. It possesses you, which means the very gift of the dark empath can become their greatest curse. And that brings us to the heart of the danger.
The dark empath is often described as the most dangerous personality type, not because they lack empathy, but because their empathy is fused with shadow awareness. They can feel your pain, and they know exactly where to press to deepen it. They can comfort you with one hand and quietly control you with the other. Their intelligence is surgical, precise, piercing, invisible, and that is why they are feared. Carl Jung explained that power without consciousness leads to possession by the unconscious. If the dark empath does not bring awareness to their shadow, they risk becoming an instrument of it. They might begin to manipulate without even realizing they are doing so. They might exploit trust, not out of cruelty, but out of instinct, guided by shadow impulses that whisper, "Here lies weakness. Use it." In relationships, this can lead to emotional entanglements where the dark empath alternates between healer and tormentor, savior and saboteur. They can bind others with cords of intimacy, all while feeding off the very vulnerabilities they uncover. The metaphor here is fire. A magician conjures flames from the invisible air. In the right hands, that fire warms the village, lights the darkness, and cooks the food. In the wrong hands, it burns homes, scars children, and consumes everything. The dark empath holds such fire. They can ignite illumination, or they can scorch the soul. The danger is not in the power itself, but in the absence of responsibility. Without integration, without self-awareness, the dark empath risks being consumed by their own flame. This danger is not only external, it also haunts the dark empath themselves, because when you live so close to the shadow, you are constantly at risk of projection. You might see in others what you fear in yourself. You might manipulate because you dread being manipulated. You might harm because you are secretly nursing your own wound. And in the end, the line between healer and destroyer blurs. Many dark empaths live in this torment, craving to help, yet sometimes inflicting harm, longing for truth, yet sometimes weaving illusions. Jung would say, this is the threshold. Here, the dark empath must choose. Either they continue to wield their intelligence unconsciously, becoming a trickster figure who manipulates and controls, or they step into the painful work of individuation, integrating their shadow, owning their power, and transforming it. Because the shadow does not disappear, it must be faced, claimed, and integrated. Only then does the fire become light instead of destruction. But is such a transformation truly possible? Can the dark empath escape the gravitational pull of their own dangerous intelligence? Or are they destined to become predators of the soul? That is the question we turn to next, the possibility of transformation, where poison can become medicine and shadow can become wisdom.
Carl Jung never saw the shadow as something to be destroyed. He saw it as something to be integrated. The dark empath embodies this truth more than anyone. Their intelligence is dangerous only when it is unconscious. But when it becomes conscious, when the empath learns to take responsibility for their shadow instead of projecting it outward, that same intelligence transforms. It ceases to be a curse and begins to reveal itself as a mission. Think of the alchemical tradition, which Jung loved to reference. The alchemists believed that poison could be transformed into medicine, that lead could be transmuted into gold.
This was not merely about chemicals, it was about the soul. The dark empath's shadow knowledge is like a vial of venom. Left unacknowledged, it corrodes everything it touches. But when consciously distilled, it becomes a healing tincture. The very ability to see into others' wounds becomes the gift that allows the dark empath to guide them toward healing, without exploitation, without hidden strings. This is not an easy path. Integration demands brutal honesty. The dark empath must admit, yes, I can manipulate. Yes, I can wound. Yes, I can use my sensitivity for harm. It is only by naming this potential that they gain mastery over it. Jung called this the process of individuation, becoming whole by reconciling light and shadow, conscious and unconscious. For the dark empath, individuation is not optional, it is survival. Without it, they remain trapped in the dance of healer and saboteur. With it, they step into their true role, a guide, a bridge, a wise magician of the psyche. When a dark empath chooses integration, they begin to shift their intention. Instead of probing wounds to control, they probe to reveal. Instead of using insight to bind, they use it to liberate. Their presence still unsettles, but in a different way, not because people feel manipulated, but because people feel truly seen. And to be seen at the level of shadow and soul is terrifying and healing at once. That is why conscious dark empaths often become extraordinary therapists, leaders, writers, or visionaries. They channel their dangerous intelligence not to dominate, but to illuminate. This transformation is also a validation for anyone who feels the weight of this archetype. If you have ever felt guilty for sensing too much, for knowing people's motives before they speak them, for feeling the temptation to use that knowledge, you're not condemned. You are called. The very fact that you are aware of this double-edged capacity is proof that you can choose. And choice is the axis of individuation. But here is the alchemical paradox. You cannot choose integration by denying your shadow. You cannot say, I am only compassionate, I would never harm. That is repression, and repression feeds the shadow. You must say, I could harm, I could manipulate, but I will not. That is responsibility. That is conscious power. And it is here that the dark empath ceases to be merely dangerous, they become invaluable. Because in a world where so many hide from their darkness, the one who has walked through it becomes the guide for others. Yet even integration is not the end. For Jung, individuation was a lifelong journey. And for the dark empath, that journey leads toward a destiny that is as demanding as it is luminous. What is that destiny? To become not just an empath or a shadow bearer, but something far older, far more archetypal, a magician of the soul, dangerous only to illusion, liberating to truth.
If the narcissist's destiny is to consume and collapse, and the naive empath's destiny is to suffer and dissolve, the dark empath holds a different path. Their destiny, when they choose integration, is to walk as a liminal figure between light and shadow, healer and trickster, human and archetype. Jung might have called this the path of the magus, the soul sorcerer, who draws wisdom from both realms and uses it in service of the whole. This destiny begins with balance. The dark empath must constantly walk the razor's edge between compassion and control, between perception and projection. They're never free from the shadow. They're simply in conscious dialogue with it. This makes them powerful, but also perpetually responsible. For them, power is never casual, it is sacred. Each insight they deliver, each wound they touch, each truth they reveal carries weight. And so their life becomes less about comfort and more about responsibility. To use their intelligence for illumination rather than domination. The true dark empath transformed, becomes dangerous only to falsehood. They are feared not because they manipulate, but because they reveal. In a society built on masks, pretenses, and performances, someone who can pierce directly into the shadow is unsettling. But it is precisely this unsettling presence that the world needs, because without it, we remain trapped in collective illusions. With it, we are invited to wake up. There is also a personal reward in this destiny. For the dark empath, integration brings not just power but peace. The inner war between compassion and manipulation, between guilt and temptation, begins to quiet. They no longer feel split between healer and saboteur, angel and demon. They begin to feel whole, and that wholeness radiates outward. Others feel it not as threat, but as clarity. The dark empath becomes a mirror in which others can see their own shadows and survive the sight. Jung believed that individuation was the highest goal of the psyche, to become who you truly are, not by rejecting darkness, but by weaving it into light. The dark empath's destiny is perhaps the clearest embodiment of this teaching. They are proof that even the most dangerous intelligence can be transformed. They are proof that empathy does not have to remain naive, nor does shadow have to remain destructive. When brought together in awareness, they form a wisdom that is rare, unsettling, and desperately needed. And so we end where we began, the question of danger. Is the dark empath truly the most dangerous type of person? Yes, when unconscious, they are. But when conscious, their danger is transmuted. They become dangerous only to lies, to illusions, to the false selves that keep us asleep. In that sense, their intelligence is not just dangerous, it is liberating. It is the power to light fires that do not burn, but reveal. It is the power to walk into the world's darkness and become, paradoxically, a source of illumination. Because in the end, Jung's lesson remains. The intelligence of the dark empath is dangerous only when denied. Integrated, it becomes the very power that illuminates the shadow of the world.